At that moment, I was like, I bet you this is Lyme disease. I don't blame Lyme for my complete inflammatory response. I believe that was the straw that broke the camel's back. That was kind of the last thing that tipped my body over the edge, and all of a sudden, I was very sick. Paper, I was doing everything right. I was taking the medications, detoxing. I changed my diet entirely. It seemed like, okay, I should be getting better. Really, I was feeling worse. I started learning about the nervous system and the brain's involvement in chronic illness. And I remember I was at a neighbor's barbecue. There were people around. I was standing there and it had been like 20, 30 minutes. And I wasn't anxious. That was success for me. Brain retraining, anyone can do it, whether you've had this for 50 years or 1 year. We're retraining our brains all the time.
So today I am here with Lindsay of Vital Side, and I want to just go ahead and jump on into the conversation. So Lindsay, could you give the listeners a little bit of background on you and how you really got into all of this work?
Thank you for having me, Hannah. I appreciate it. Well, it first started when I got into health. And so I was working as a travel PA, and I was doing internal medicine, practicing internal medicine in really kind of rural areas around the country. And because it was a travel job, I got to kind of practice for a couple months and then go travel, kind of do what I wanted to do, which was amazing in your 20s to kind of have that experience. And I started to get sick. I was traveling internationally at the time, and I kind of thought, okay, I am experiencing jet lag. I'm tired. But then I would start to get migraines, and like the fatigue was unbearable. And it became this kind of downhill slope of just symptom after symptom, things I really never experienced before. All of a sudden, I became like sensitive to my environment and foods that I was eating, and really just was experiencing a lot of inflammation. So my practitioner brain was kind of like, okay, well, yeah, no, this really isn't jet lag anymore. What could this be? And I was racking my brain. And at the time, I was traveling a lot internationally, came back to the States, and my husband and I were mountain biking, and I was getting so tired, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. And he had a tick on his arm, and he like flicked it off, and he was like, hey, remember when you got bitten by a tick, earlier this year? It's like, oh, I didn't even think of it at the time because Lyme wasn't endemic to the area I was in. I was in the Redwoods in California when I was bitten by a tick, and I went to PA school on the East Coast, so I knew Lyme very well, but it's really, that was kind of specific to the area. And I thought, okay, no, this can't be Lyme. But at that moment, I was like, I bet you this is Lyme disease. And it's an interesting process because when we get sick, we always try to kind of connect the dots and figure out, how did we get here? And I don't blame Lyme for my complete inflammatory response. I believe that was the straw that broke the camel's back. That was kind of the last thing that tipped my body over the edge, and all of a sudden, I was very sick. So I moved to Austin, Texas, and I started seeking care, went down the Western route first because that's my training, experimented with integrative, holistic, and quickly saw that a lot of the same kind of rigidity that applied to Western medicine also applied to these, other types of more kind of holistic wellness. And I tried it all. Especially at the time, I was a very 0 to 100 person. I was like, okay, I'm going to put 100% of my effort into healing because this sucks. This is horrible. Like, this is debilitating. And I couldn't work. Wasn't doing much of anything. My husband had to stay at home to take care of me and get a work from home job. My sister and sister-in-law moved next door so they can help take care of me. I mean, I was to the point where for about a month I was bedbound I could hardly lift my arm up to wash my hair. Like my joints were so inflamed. And it was interesting because the more I detoxed, the more inflamed my body got. So all of a sudden I was like not just sensitive to a few foods. I was sensitive to like all foods. And I started to get really dizzy spells if I was around a scent that was, quote unquote, toxic and all these things. And so on paper, I was doing everything right. I was taking the medications. That's how I started out. I was detoxing. I changed my diet entirely. I changed like all my products I used. And it seemed like, okay, I should be getting better. Really, I was feeling worse. And that's when I thought, okay, there's got to be something else. Like, why? On paper, I should be healthy. And I started learning about the nervous system and the brain's involvement in chronic illness. And I just came across it on a blog post. Like so many of us at that point, like I know so many people listening are like, I can totally relate to this. We're seeking. We want more information. We want to hear about the person who had something similar and healed and got better and is living their life again. And that's what I was looking for. So I came across a blog post on this information and specifically how that physiological stress response gets turned on when we're dealing with an infection. And I thought, that's because why isn't my body responding appropriately, effectively to these things that should be helping me? And I learned, from this girl's experience that when in that state of the stress response, physiological stress response, meaning the body is communicating stress and getting that negative feedback loop of stress, sending that to the brain, getting, more of that stress response and that communication cycle, then it makes it really hard to heal because your body responds in inflammation, fight, gotta stay in fight, gotta, keep the bad things away. And that results in inflammation and sensitivities and all of these other symptoms that I was experiencing, even pain. And that was a really big light bulb moment for me. And it made sense. And I was like, I knew there was something else. I just didn't know what it was. So when I learned about that, I committed to it. I was like, I'm sick, taking 80 supplements a day. I'm tired, of doing all of this detox, and I want to do something differently. So I started reading as much as I could, Norman Deutsch, Joe Dispenza, Candace Pert, this information on the brain and the impact it has on the body and vice versa. And I did all the programs that were offered at the time. This was, almost a decade ago. And I started to see changes within a couple of weeks. And I remember I was at a barbecue, a neighbor's barbecue, or I guess it was a crawfish broil. Okay, I live in Texas. So it was a crawfish broil. There were people around. And I was standing there and it had been 30 minutes. And I wasn't anxious. I wasn't eating the food, but I was there. My body wasn't responding in this sensitivity, inflammatory response. And I just remember looking around and telling my husband, whoa, you're 30 minutes. And then I was like, okay, I need to go home before I jinx this experience because this is amazing. That was success for me. And I continued that path. I slowly decreased all the supplements I was taking. I didn't want to be taking them forever. I, started to really see changes to my health. And it took about 8 months to a year to actually feel better and to have a lot of those symptoms slough off to the point where, okay, I was ready to go back to work. I was feeling so good. And I was like, okay, I could get involved in going back to what I was doing, but I didn't feel like I could ethically do that with the information I learned. And I was like, I want to plug this in to healthcare. I want to help practitioners understand the importance of this specific field for those patients who have just been doing all the right things but aren't seeing results. And that's when I created VitalSide. So that was officially in 2018. And I started with local practitioners in Austin, trying to work with their patients, really coincide, like simultaneously had the practitioner work from the physical standpoint, and for me, more of that physiological stress response. And it has been incredible. So now we have online programs, courses, coaches. It's been really beautiful to see it expand and evolve. And it's great because this is what helped me. And it's incredible to see other people continue to heal their symptoms, get their lives back. It's one of the most rewarding things.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So do you think that when we can kind of shift the nervous system out of that fight or flight state and into more of, the parasympathetic, this safety response, that these other interventions can actually work to their fullest extent? Things like supplements and things like even medications and all of that. Do you feel like the body can actually respond better to these things when, we're not actively in that fight or flight?
I will say yes and ... So yes, a lot of people will kind of look up the hashtag nervous system regulation, use a couple breaths and say, okay, like I'm going to add this, to my healing protocol with whatever I'm doing. And okay, like breathing is wonderful. And I want to point out that supplements can be wonderful. Medication can be wonderful. There's nothing like this is the right thing and you should only do this. Oftentimes it takes that complex approach to individualized healing. But what happens is people think nervous system regulation is just feeling calmer, and they do something like a breath work and add that to their practice. And sometimes they don't see the benefits of that physiologically. And it's not because the breath doesn't work. It's because often we're stuck in this state of chronic physiological stress. And I keep saying physiological because sometimes we think it's simply psychological. So it's like, I don't experience anxiety or depression or emotional kind of, waves. And it doesn't have to be like that. It can be the body experiencing stress as a result of something like mold exposure or virus or a psychological trauma, because our bodies respond to trauma in the same way. They don't differentiate from, oh, this is like childhood trauma I didn't process, and this is a Lyme bacteria. Our bodies experience that trauma in the same way. So sometimes when we're kind of using a regulation tool and fitting it in, we need something more. We need something deeper. We need something where we can actually retrain our brains out of a chronic state of fight, flight, or the freeze response. And so that's why more structured protocols are very helpful. So that's exactly why I love to work with people like you, practitioners who do address that physical body component. And then also, we can use the nervous system regulation work, because what we're doing is we're setting the body up for homeostasis. We're setting the body up to maintain its normal kind of equilibrium, really, where this place where you're not constantly releasing stress hormones so much so that it depletes your body of stress hormones. We're actually able to get your body back and kind of to a normalized response so that you can effectively take the supplement and take the medication without being in that state of chronic stress, which ultimately helps to metabolize it better. And so you do get more benefits from taking those things and doing additional treatments when you're using nervous system regulation.
Yeah, absolutely. We really see that in our clients. So those that come in that are, I don't want to misuse this or phrase this improperly, but like just more regulated kind of at their base. Like you can tell when you're speaking to someone, typically they tend to do better. The ones that just honestly trust the process They don't question every intervention, right? So it's like you can pick up on someone's just energy behind it and where their nervous system set point might be by, it's like we add this in and then they question it. We add this in and then they question it, because it's like you start to, it's like everything's almost a threat, right? So it's like when you're in this state, everything around you is almost seen as a threat, whether it's a supplement intervention or trying a new food or resting instead of pushing through or whatever. It's like the brain is kind of stuck in this response where it's like it's interpreting everything around you as a threat, including the food that you're eating, because it's like that pattern has been wired in the brain and in the body. I eat this food, I react. I eat this food, I react, right? So we really see those that are deeper in their regulation practices, or maybe just haven't even struggled as long, because I think the longer you've been struggling, the more that pattern gets wired, right? So it's like if we can find someone when they've been struggling with digestive issues for a year, so them feeling quote unquote normal or good isn't that far away, right? Versus someone who's been struggling for like 15 years, it's almost easier to like get in there and do the good gut work with them. And not even because their gut, doesn't have as much damage. It's more so because they can like access the feeling of, feeling symptom free more easily almost. So it's something that we see pretty consistent in our clients. And what's also interesting is those that, and I wasn't planning on sharing this, but what I see is those that also have like stronger faith, whatever that is for them, tend to also do better in the program and react less to things. And that's not something that I can explain. Like, it's not because of the magnesium, right? It's more so, I think, like the trust and safety that they can feel in their body, which I think is really just interesting. So, we'll see people that lean more a bit more like hypervigilant, or they're scanning for threats. And listen, there's no blame or shame to this. Like, that's my whole existence. I know that very well. I mean, tons of childhood trauma, tons of striving to be the best and perfectionist tendencies and all of that. That's really like the chaos is all my brain and body knows or knew. But it was interesting to see on my gut repairing journey personally, the nervous system work. I mean, my like baseline is just different than it was before. So I think that's really important for people to understand too. It's like you do the work consistently and then your baseline kind of shifts too. But anyway, I think it's truly so important, and we see our interventions working better for those that can just like maintain more of a regulated state. When we speak about brain retraining, can you break that down for us? I mean, what does it mean? What is the definition of brain retraining, and why is that important?
Well, first, to just piggyback off of what you said, you mentioned there's no blame and shame in experiencing that physiological state of stress. And even in your experience, it's a result of experiences had. So it's not a personality trait. It may have become one as a result of your experiences. And like when I got that diagnosis of Lyme, I did go briefly down the rabbit hole of like looking at people online, finding communities like chronic Lyme groups and stuff like that. And I very quickly was like, ooh, I'm not going to go there, because what I found was that people had been experiencing chronic Lyme for 10, 20, 50 years and living with it and made it their identity. So yeah, like because we have lived with it for so long, or we've had so many of these experiences, it does make sense why we can kind of easily latch onto the diagnosis. And when we do, increase that inflammatory response and the cycle continues. So it can become a personality trait. But you're right, when we can really take a step back and say, this is the way my body's been responding, and connect with what it could be like to experience a different way of being, it can be extremely helpful. And so that said, brain retraining, anyone can do it, whether you've had this for 50 years or 1 year. We're retraining our brains all the time. So I think it's kind of a funny term because, first of all, people can feel really intimidated by it when it's something that we're naturally doing all the time. How I explain it to my clients is we're just doing it in a more intentional way. So, for example, you listening to the podcast today, you are training your brain. what's going on in your brain is you're creating new neural pathways. And so these synapses form between neurons, these basic brain cells. And the more that you learn about a particular topic, the stronger the neural pathway becomes. And the more that you kind of don't learn about something, say you tried Spanish, but you really got into guitar and they're both new and you're like practicing guitar a lot more. You know, you have those neural pathways for Spanish and guitar. But the more that you practice guitar, the stronger those pathways become, and eventually can prune away the pathway related to Spanish because you're not practicing it. So, you know, if you don't use it, you lose it, kind of thing. And that's exactly what happens when we're being intentional about retraining our brains. So when we are experiencing chronic stress, now, again, I mentioned it can be a very physiological stress, or it could be mental and emotional. So it could be like, you know, thinking again and again, believing I am not enough, I cannot heal, these types of beliefs. And the more that we think about them, the more that we pay attention to them and put energy into them, the stronger those pathways become. But if we recognize that that's an old belief system, we can actually prune away and dissipate that pathway. And we can replace it with a new one. So for example, this will be a really basic example, right? But maybe anytime you write an email, you're like, oh, this isn't good enough. I'm not good enough. Like this is, you know, this sucks. And if you start to become aware of that limiting belief, in the moment that that happens, you could say, oh, this is based on past experiences, not today. What if I am enough? What if I am perfect the way that I am today? What if I'm showing up there? And then you take a deep breath in and you finish writing that email. Okay, very, very simple example. But even something as small as that can make a change to your brain. And all of a sudden, that pathway associated to that strong limiting belief of I'm not good enough becomes a little bit smaller. And so we do that in the chronically healing world as well. For example, we used the example of food earlier. So when we're sensitive to a particular food, okay, so say we're sensitive to red peppers and, oh, but I used to love red peppers and like a frittata and they were so good. And now I can't eat them. Right now I respond like I felt so bloated and gross afterwards. I really want to eat red peppers again. So it's this process of that physiological stress rather than the mental and emotional component, but you work with your brain in the same capacity. So it's kind of like, okay, I'm going to slowly introduce the idea of eating this food again. And then we run through a structured protocol to connect with feel-good emotions and neurochemicals and honestly different hormones in order to break the physiological stress response in association to what we initially are training with, eating red peppers. And you can even, we go into an element of visualization along with some more passive neuroplastic tools. And we're able to connect with what it feels like to eat those red peppers again, to eat that frittata. And you think of an experience where potentially like your favorite breakfast place that's local, you eat this frittata, it's your favorite type of frittata, and it's mouth-watering, and you're with friends, and you're able to connect neurochemically, hormonally, emotionally in a different way. And then by the end of that protocol, which takes about 15 minutes to complete, you're reconnected with this food in a different way. And what we do is we actually slowly introduce the food. And food is one of my favorite things to work with because it's so tangible. Like some of those other symptoms, it can be there can be some ambiguity to it, like anxiety and fatigue, just because those are kind of harder to measure. With food, it's like we can introduce the concept, the smell, then we can introduce a little bite of it, and then like a whole, or a half a pepper, something like that, which is really cool to measure. But it is changing how we respond to this particular food. And so long story, but ultimately we're retraining our brains all the time. There is just that intentionality to how we do it in Vital Side in response to getting your life back and doing the things that you want to do. And as a result, you can feel lighter and brighter, potentially calmer, because you're calming that stress response entirely, but you're doing it around specific areas that you want to improve, that you want to reconnect with.
Yeah, it's so amazing. And I think that it's just a note on like the Facebook groups and the exposure, right? I mean, one of the things that I'm always saying is like, get out of these groups, like get out of them, because all you're seeing is people not get better, you know? And what you're often also seeing is people not get better without proper support. So, you know, we'll see a lot of like SIBO, like people that are in SIBO groups. And I'm like, get out of these groups, because all you're seeing is people going, my doctor can't help me. Oh my gosh, I've had it for 10 years. I've had it for 15 years. I can't eat anything. I'm so sick. It's getting worse. And usually they don't have like a good strategy, like structurally when it comes to the gut stuff, right? So a lot of people miss a lot there. And then you're kind of just infiltrating your brain with, oh my gosh, maybe I will never get over this, or maybe I will be stuck with this, or, well, they're not getting better. Am I going to get better? Right. And it's like, there's that saying, which I know sounds like corny, but it's like, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. Right. So it's like, as long as you're basically programming your brain with these negative stories of people never getting better. So I think it's so important. And that's why I like to share a lot of our client success stories, because it like opens this little, you know, funnel up for you to go, oh, well, then maybe it could happen for me too. And that's not like manipulation. It's just like, see these other possibilities that do exist for you on the other side. You actually don't have to be living like this your entire life. I mean, I can't even name how many people we've helped reintroduce more foods, because the gut also rebuilds over time too, right? So it's like you're rewiring the brain and these neural pathways, and then also the gut can build up resiliency. It's like a muscle. And of course, we can optimize digestion and the microbiome to respond better to these foods too. And I think it's such an important topic, because in this functional health space, we're very, very quick to just eliminate these foods. It's gluten, it's dairy, it's oxalates, it's FODMAPs, it's sugar, it's this, it's that. And then people are like chronically stressed out because they don't even know what to eat anymore. And then they're just afraid of every food. And then that's not going to set them up for good digestion, because we also know like enter fight or flight, increase cortisol. Cortisol wears away at the gut lining, you know, damages the mucosal barrier, it negatively impacts stomach acid production. So stress, you know, something that I say a lot is like, stress doesn't stay stress. It has these impacts on the body. It influences the immune system. All of these things are going to influence how we actually respond to these foods, you know? So coupling the work, the brain retraining work, with also the more like structural, I guess, work can be, I mean, absolutely game changing, you know? So I do think it's very important to get out of these groups where you're just being fed with like these negative stories of people never getting better, because then you will start to believe that you'll never get better. And I think that's it's the reticular activating system. Am I right on that?
Right, where if you are surrounding yourself with kind of like thinking about a particular topic, like, you know, oh, things are never going to change for me. And then all of a sudden you see these stories of people not changing their health. And it's kind of like what you focus on determines what you experience more of. And so the reticular activating system in the brain is the thing that kind of hyper focuses on that. And like shorter examples, like, I really, really want this like red sports car, and then you start to see red sports cars everywhere because you're researching it and you're committing energy and time to it. It's not always kind of serendipitous. It's often a result of just noticing that thing more. So yeah, we can apply it to our health and our healing.
Yeah, amazing. So another thing that I wanted to bring up was that I saw this post that you shared on your Instagram, and it said, you listed like conditioned belief. This works for everyone but me. And then you listed prefrontal cortex response, and this kind of switching that belief and offering your body something else. So can you speak to this belief pattern, because a lot of people that come to us think this, right? Well, I've tried everything. It's not going to work for me. It works for everyone else, but it won't work for me. And I used to hold this belief a lot too. And then I just started switching it to like, why not me? Why couldn't it work for me if it can work for other people, right? So can you speak a little bit to that belief pattern and also like the resistance that a lot of people feel to shifting the belief pattern?
When we have experienced that chronic physiological state of stress, it makes sense that we have a lot of these negative beliefs because our bodies have been experiencing this virus, this bacteria, this traumatic event for months, maybe years and years. And it affects the way that we think, the beliefs that we have. And so, of course, I just kind of want to first normalize that. Of course you have that belief, especially if this has been an ongoing chronic issue. And that belief of, okay, this works for everybody else but me makes sense too, because you've likely tried a lot of things and you haven't seen that change in the way that you feel. And that's how I felt too, even though my healing was a lot shorter than most. One, because I was really putting 100% of effort, that 0 to 100 type person who was like, I'm going to try everything at once, which I don't actually recommend, but that was just kind of how I was addressing healing. And two, because I was like, this is this really sticky slope. I do not want to go down this rabbit hole and know that my life is going to be like this forever, because that's what I was told over and over again. So coming back to that belief of this works for everyone else but not me, it's often a result of that kind of chronic symptoms, the chronic diagnosis, the chronic inflammation. So when you are experiencing that belief and again and again, you are going to get results that really make that belief stronger. Again, going back to the neural pathways we experience. Okay, I tried this medication, or I tried this supplement, or I tried this protocol, and it just doesn't work. And so you get results that really strengthen that belief. So what we instead want to do is think about it from more of that neural pathway perspective, which leaves emotional context out of it. Meaning the more energy we put towards that pathway, the stronger it becomes. And when we create a new neural pathway, we can strengthen it over and over and over again. And we need our prefrontal cortexes to do this, because we store these beliefs really in the subconscious brain, likely from when we were children, that we had an experience happen and we're like, oh, I'm going to store that immediately in the subconscious brain. And that's why a lot of childhood trauma impacts us later on. We're in our 30s and 40s and we're like, why do I feel this way? Why do I have this belief? Likely from events, T or little t traumas that have culminated throughout the years. And so, okay, now we're experiencing this belief. So the prefrontal cortex is responsible for really taking conscious action, making decisions, and making choices that work for you. Well, a lot of times when we're experiencing the chronic inflammatory stress response, we're operating from our limbic brains, our feeling, emotional, reactive brains. And that limbic brain is communicating that cycle of stress over and over again, communicating that to our pituitary glands, which is kind of like the hormone control center of the body, and releasing stress hormones or communicating that stress so that the body responds like you're in imminent danger, and does it again and again and again. So you can imagine the wear and tear that we experience getting that signal of danger all the time, which is why we get the blood test back and our hormones are all out of whack. And we have no cortisol because we released all the cortisol we could, that stress hormone, and now it's plummeted because we can't physically produce anymore. So all to say how the physical body is impacted. So back to that belief. Well, we want to be able to use our thinking conscious brain to override this automatic response that's going on in our limbic brains, that feeling emotional, reacting brain. And it does take that conscious awareness, that conscious control. So becoming aware of our belief systems is very, very important. And we have that kind of protocol to walk you through how to do that in Vital Side. And then once we become aware of those beliefs, we learn to break them and prune away those old neural pathways. So again, one of the easiest ways is to replace it with a new one. And I like to use suggestion, the power of suggestion, especially with a belief that's so ingrained, like this works for everyone else but me. So we use words, we use neuro-linguistic programming to start to change the way we feel about something. So one easy way to replace that belief just linguistically is I am open to the concept of my body healing. I am open to experiencing healing in a new and different way. I am open to this course or this supplement working for me, right? And so like consciously replacing it with that belief and how we inject that belief in throughout our days, individualized. And we also give like protocols and practices to kind of help you do that. But one easy way for listeners to do that today is writing it down, putting it in your bathroom on the mirror. And every time you see it, say it. Say it a few times. Close your eyes and connect with what it feels like to have this different belief. And so you're trying it on for size. Like it's like you're trying an outfit on. Not necessarily yours. You're not fully comfortable in it yet, but you're feeling it out and you're feeling into what that would be like. So even stepping into the shoes of someone you heard on a testimonial, like how would they feel? How do they feel? Could you try that on? And what happens is neurochemically, when we see somebody else do that thing, heal, or whatever it is, we're able to say, okay, like now I'm going to use my mirror neurons and try that on for size. How does that feel inside my body? So it's kind of like a really, like, I hate the saying fake it till you make it, but it's kind of like, it's a bit crass, but it's this idea of trying it on, connecting emotionally with the experience. And when you do that, you connect neurochemically, hormonally with this experience. So it becomes a felt sensation in your body. And when you release feel-good neurochemicals like dopamine, endorphins, oxytocin, serotonin, when you release things like that, you actually physiologically break that chronic stress cycle. You cannot release cortisol, epinephrine, like at the same time you're releasing those things. So you're breaking that cycle. And it is about interjecting those pathways, interjecting those thoughts again and again and again. So making it a habit. So it becomes a bit of a lifestyle. And so maybe like you don't even pay attention to that belief anymore. And you're simply focused on, I am open to feeling what it feels like to heal. That becomes habitual. And it's just like creating any habit. We do it again and again and again. That neural pathway gets stronger and stronger and breaks away that old pathway associated to the fact that you are the outlier, that you can't do this, that it works for everyone else but you. So it's quite a process. It does take time. And like, it's not easy. It is complex and it is kind of like a thing that you commit your time and energy to. But like, when you do it and you learn how to do it, it gets easier and easier, more fun. And then you're doing the things you want to do again, and you're feeling the way that you feel, like have been wanting to feel. You're becoming that person that you're like, you've seen on testimonials, and it's an extraordinary practice.
Yeah, so beautiful. And I think that, and you can tell me if you agree with this or not, but I think that these belief systems that we hold and what we believe to be true for ourselves, that then influences our actions, right? And this is what I speak to. So the first coaching session that I have in my like group coaching program, it's all about belief. What are you believing? What are you believing about your body? What are you already coming into this program believing about this program? Are you doubting it before we've literally even started, right? Like you're not even potentially open to this working for you. However, if you invested in the program, chances are you're at least a little open to it, right? Which is great. And that's why I like to celebrate people that take that leap, because you're already opening yourself up to something different. That's part of the transformation. But these belief systems influence our actions. And then of course, our actions are going to influence the results that we get. So in regards to, I use the example of building my business. I did not go to business school. I didn't study this or anything like that. But there was part of me that believed that I could build this business and get these results, get the results for clients, and also get the results for myself in regards to my business goals. And I had to choose to show up and believe that that was possible every day. And since I did believe that that was possible, even though I also doubted it a lot too, then that would influence the actions that I started to take in regards to building my business, right? So the first step is what do you have to believe in order to actually do the things that you need to do in order to get the results that you want to get, So it's the belief is immediately influencing your body chemically, and then also kind of opening up that space for you to go, okay, well, I'm going to take this next step then. Oh, I believe that I may not react so much, so I am going to go to the barbecue. Let's see what happens, right? Versus I don't know, I'm just going to stay home because I'm not sure, and I don't think I could actually get better, right? So it's these beliefs are really influencing the actions that we can take that then influence the results that one can get. Would you agree with that?
Yes, and belief take small pieces of incremental change. And so, we can be that sort of optimistic kind of person who's yeah, this could probably work for me. That's amazing. It takes so long to get to that point. So yes, but for the person who's oh my gosh, that's not me. I'm naturally a wary person. And a lot of that is a result of, experienced trauma. And so my body, my fight or flight response when something feels new and different goes, this potentially could be dangerous. But because I have that awareness of that response, I'm able to kind of take a step back and say, okay, how can I look at this from a different perspective? How can I understand that that's my body's protective mechanisms and give this a shot, and do something that could work for me? So it does take some time to create that belief. We don't want that blind optimism, because what happens is you have that blind optimism and then you quickly kind of are doing the thing, and maybe you're not seeing immediate changes. And then, I'm not going to do it anymore. So we want that kind of incremental progress. So my suggestion with that is to create consistency and persistence. And so build the persistence first. Make that commitment of, okay, I'm going to commit to doing 10, 20 minutes of this every day, no matter how I feel. Because ultimately, that consistency will help build the belief, because now you're seeing evidence for change. And it's that evidence for change that we need to really reinstill and strengthen that belief that this can work for me. So I say that because I wasn't the person who went into brain retraining thinking, 100% this is going to work for me. But it took going to that crawfish broil, that evidence for change of okay, after 3 to 4 weeks, I was able to do this. Now I want more pieces of evidence for change. And so the way that we work with clients is to get those small pieces. Something else I trained with was, I couldn't at one point lift my hand over my head to wash my hair. So I worked with actually lifting it up to 30, 60, 90 degrees over weeks, then eventually lifting 1 pound, and then eventually lifting 5 pounds, and then 10 pounds. So you can imagine that process took months and months to complete. But it's when I was able to achieve those small wins, get those gold stars for these smaller wins of okay, that belief is getting stronger because now I can do this. And then all of a sudden, after a few months, I was this can work for me. This is the thing. This is how So there are ways to strengthen those beliefs, and it does take that small evidence for change. Start with persistence, start with a daily commitment, and committing a little bit of time to yourself to break those old patterns.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. So one other thing that I want to get into here is like sourcing safety. From our lens, when we're working with women, the female body is incredibly sensitive to feelings of safety. So we need to make sure that we're eating enough. We need to make sure that we're not over exercising. We're sleeping enough. We're more susceptible to stress, our cortisol levels. Like I don't want to butcher it, but I believe there was a study that literally showed when a woman is laying in bed and the man comes in to get in bed next to her and his stress levels are high, his cortisol levels are high, her cortisol levels will rise in response to like essentially feeling his stress. So women are just we're more, I think, susceptible to stressors from like just a biological standpoint as well. Like we don't tolerate fasting very well. We don't tolerate super low carbohydrates very well. Like the body really needs to feel safe. It needs adequate nutrients in order to menstruate, in order to ovulate, in order to produce adequate progesterone, that kind of thing. So we talk a lot about balancing blood sugar, eating enough, not skipping breakfast, not overdoing caffeine, a lot of mineral support, right? So that's kind of more of like supporting the body like physically. But can you talk about the importance of sourcing safety through like via the nervous system, and also like what does that look like?
It is individualized, despite the fact that, you're speaking to women, it's individualized to the person. So really, I encourage, if you're listening today, to tap into what does help you to feel that sense of safety, and going pretty deep here. And so one subject that's like one of my favorites to talk about is like instinct versus intuition. Instinct is that response to stress, to danger, to potential danger. That can be rewired, right? And so that hypervigilance, again, it's not necessarily a characteristic or personality trait, but it can be a result of that physiological stress response. Okay, so knowing that when the person comes into bed and maybe he's, your partner, and they're dealing with like a lot of stress at work or something, when we are able to regulate our own nervous systems and able to say like, okay, this is mine, that is theirs, we're able to not take that on as much. And so we're able to kind of regulate our own nervous systems to maybe even hold space or have capacity to address what stress they're going through. So all to say, that's instinct, right? And so we are able to kind of normalize to regulate our nervous systems to get to the place where we're not reacting to everyone's energies around us. And we're able to kind of hone into our own like safety bubble. Like I always like put my arms out from side to side, up and down, like around me. I'm like, this is my bubble. This is what I'm responsible for. Even my child, even my husband, my friends, like I'm not responsible for theirs. I can show up and have capacity for them. And especially, like with my child, can co-regulate with them. But knowing that this is mine, knowing that this is what I'm responsible for, makes it a lot easier to regulate my own nervous system and then show up for them. But then to kind of say, okay, like, how can I show up now? How can I kind of be that person who connects with intuition? That's really the question. Like, that's how I think of it. I need to connect with my own intuition rather than like that believing every instinct that that's dangerous. So that's when it gets fun. That's when it gets pretty deep of like knowing that the instinct is like the initial alarm bells and the reaction. That intuition is like what speaks from the gut and is kind of like, okay, I think of this one time where my dog, like this is kind of a silly example, but my dog was playing in the creek behind my house. And I was just sitting outside and I couldn't see him. But I had this response of like, oh, Koa's in danger. Go to the creek. And it wasn't like the heart beating fast. It wasn't like that instinctual response. It was like a thought that popped up in my head. It was like a kind of like gut response. And I went and there was, some coyotes there. And so I was able to get him out of that situation. That's intuition. And we can have those intuitive kind of ways to understand safety and danger, which is really, really special. So, all to say, what I encourage the person to do today is to sit down and kind of connect intuitively, like felt sensations. What makes you feel that sense of safety? What is it? The things in your life, the emotions, the experiences, the people where you can close your eyes and feel the sensory experience, like connecting to your five senses of like, what does that safety feel like? And you can think of it from the sense of like a person, an actual experience, like a hobby or a passion project or a job. But like, it's not really about that person or the job. It's really about the emotional experiences that allow you that sense of safety. And that's a really good way to come back to feeling safe when like external circumstances cause you to feel that lack of safety. Of like, okay, wait, these are the things where I feel that sensation of safety. And it is internal and we can access it internally. So I guess, again, to kind of like just make this a little bit more concise, instincts are wired based on past experiences. If you're naturally a hypervigilant person who can say, I'm in that state of chronic physiological stress, you don't always have to believe every red flag instinct. What I encourage you to do is go deeper. What were the voices of intuition that you've heard throughout your life? Maybe you can name one or two. And that's amazing. Go deeper with that and connect with the felt sensations that you may have experienced when you connect with intuition, or when you even just like focus on that bird safety. What is that for you? And, even how can you connect with that on a daily basis to make that more of a habit in your life?
Yeah. And for the person that's listening, that's like, that sounds great, but I haven't heard my gut instinct in a long time. Like I have too many thoughts and feelings in this brain and it's hard to access. What would you recommend for them to kind of open, like to help them get into the space where they could even hear their intuition more?
Don't do that exercise that I just recommended. Focus on calming the physiological stress response first. So our priorities are staying alive. That's what your body is built to do. That's what your brain is built to do. Everything that those instincts kind of keeping you alive are saying danger, potential threat to keep you alive. So when that is so strong and we're operating from that instinctual brain, we need to hone it in. We can't let that be in the driver's seat of our lives, because we're literally going through life and saying, threat, danger. And then I'm not leaving my house. And then I become agoraphobic. And then I don't like travel and I don't do anything. I don't form relationships because they could be potentially dangerous. So what we want to do is learn to regulate that part of our brains and communicate a new way of being, so that we can experience safety again. And again, when we step into that place of more homeostasis, we step into that place of a more regulated nervous system where maybe that part of our brain is in the car, but not in the driver's seat. It's like in the back seat in like a rear facing car seat. Like it's there when we need it, but it's not the thing that we're operating from all the time. And we do that through using structured protocols in Vital Side. So when we're able to do that, then you allow yourself more space, more capacity to connect with intuition. So instinct and intuition can allow you to feel that sensation of safety. So it's not like you won't ever feel safe if you're just paying attention to the instinct. That's just the first step. so that we can clear out space and increase capacity to really feel that guttural sensation of intuition.
Yeah. And I think a big thing that you just said is really like clearing the space, like clearing the clutter and the constant distraction, I think. So if anyone is interested in stepping into that more, my recommendations would be get off of your phone, go out into nature, close the computer, try to not have so many things on at once. Like very often we can find ourselves with the TV on and we're answering text messages and we're checking our email and we're also doing this, or we've got the podcast on and we're doing this. We're doing like 30 things at once, and it's just distracting us. Like we can't even hear ourselves in this space. So my biggest recommendations, like whenever I'm feeling like, ooh, I haven't really connected with my own intuition in a while, what's going on? I need to sleep more. I need to go to bed earlier. I need to get out into nature and I need to turn my phone off. Those are the biggest things. And then chances are like I will get that intuitive hit pretty shortly after that. Meditation can be really helpful. Breath work can be really helpful for just like, yes, clearing that space out. So just like some very tangible things that people can do to create more of that space to actually hear themselves a bit more. So yeah, I think this conversation is so very important. I think essentially like everyone ever would benefit from this work, truly. But Lindsay, do you have anything that you want to leave the audience with that we haven't covered yet today?
Well, just respond to what you just said. I think in general, those can be really good recommendations. But some people will clear that space for themselves and feel that anxiety, feel that stress response even more just because they are in that state of chronic stress. So if you are that person who's like, okay, I did shut down everything, but it's like almost that stress response gets worse when I'm quiet and silent by myself. That is a very tangible, very like real way to understand that you are in that state of physiological stress. So that would be an opportunity to take a step back and say, okay, like I am in that state of chronic stress. It's normal. And that's my hope, is to just normalize that for you, because we have so many distractions that's been kind of ingrained in you to have so many distractions and to be in that physiological state of stress. So becoming aware of that and then taking the next step just to normalize that for people who are in that place today. And if that's you and you feel that way, my next recommendation would be to start with our introductory program in Vital Side. It's called Reset, and I'm offering your listeners, Hannah, a 1-month free trial to try it out, see how you respond doing things differently, starting to retrain your brain intentionally. So that code for that that code for that course is Reset Podcast. So you can start that, and I'll give you the link, Hannah. And that's just, it takes 7 days to complete. There's 7 videos. All of the videos are 7 minutes or less. And it's a very simple way to break up that physiological state of stress. If you're just not getting there on your own and you're just not feeling the benefit of kind of like interjecting, doing these, nervous system regulation tools, this is a really structured, kind of effective way to start breaking up that pattern. So that would just be a good place to start. You're not alone in this. Like, this is something I felt. When you're dealing with chronic inflammation, that's typically what happens in your body. So know that it's normal, and then take that next step to really address that physiological state of stress.
Yeah, beautiful. And we'll make sure that the link for that and the code are in the show notes as well. And then Lindsay, where can people connect with you?
Yeah, so you want more information from me at my Vital Side is on all socials, specifically Instagram. We post a lot there, but we've got TikTok, all the things. And then you can also hear more at my podcast, the Vital Side podcast, where we talk all things through the lens of the nervous system, all things wellness, all things health. So that's a great place to learn more about this information.
Amazing. Thanks so much for being on the podcast today, Lindsay.
Thank you.